Marcus had always been the black sheep of the Harrison family, though he never quite understood why. Growing up in suburban Ohio, he was the middle child who asked too many questions, challenged too many traditions, and somehow never fit the mold his father had carefully constructed for their perfect family image. While his older brother Jake followed their father's footsteps into the family construction business, and his younger sister Emma married young and stayed close to home, Marcus had the audacity to pursue journalism and move 3 states away to Chicago. For 32 years, he'd navigated the delicate balance of maintaining family relationships while living his own life. He called every Sunday, sent birthday cards, and made the A-Tower drive home for major holidays. But it was never enough for Robert Harrison, the family patriarch who ruled with an iron fist wrapped in the guise of traditional values and Christian morality. The tension had been building for months, ever since Marcus published an investigative piece about workplace safety violations in small construction companies. He hadn't named his father's business specifically, but Robert took it as a personal attack on everything he'd built. Their last conversation had ended with Robert hanging up mid-sentence when Marcus tried to explain that journalism meant holding everyone accountable, even family. Marcus was sitting in his cramped Chicago apartment, editing a story about municipal corruption, when his phone buzzed with a text notification. The message was from his father, which was unusual since Robert Harrison was a man who believed important communications required either face-to-face conversation or formal letters. The text was brief and devastating. "Check your mail tomorrow. Important family matter." 24 hours later, Marcus stood in his building's lobby holding an envelope with his father's precise handwriting. His name was written in the formal style Robert used for business correspondence, Mr. Marcus J. Harrison, as if they were strangers conducting official business rather than father and son. The return address showed the family home where Marcus had grown up, where his mother still tended her prize-winning rose garden, and where 3 generations of Harrisons had gathered every summer for their annual reunion. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of his father's company letterhead, the same stationery used for contracts and official business. The message was typed, not handwritten, adding another layer of cold formality to what should have been a family communication. It read, "Marcus, after considerable discussion with family members, we have decided that your presence at this year's Harrison family reunion would not be appropriate. Your recent choices and public statements have brought unwanted attention and potential embarrassment to our family name. We believe it would be best for everyone if you did not attend. The reunion will proceed as planned on July 15th, 17 at the family farm. Please do not attempt to contact other family members regarding this decision, as it is final. Regards, Robert Harrison, Family Patriarch." Marcus read the letter 3 times, each reading making the words more surreal. 42 years of family reunions, and now he was officially uninvited to the gathering that had been the cornerstone of his childhood summers. The letter felt heavier than paper should. Marcus set it down on his kitchen counter and stared at it, trying to process the formal language his father had used to essentially disown him from the family's most sacred tradition. Family patriarch. When had Robert started signing letters that way? It sounded like something from a medieval drama, not a communication between a father and son in modern-day America. Marcus walked to his window overlooking the busy Chicago street, watching people hurry past with their own lives, their own family dramas, their own problems. He thought about calling his mother, Linda, but Robert's warning about not contacting other family members echoed in his mind. His father had effectively isolated him, and knowing Robert Harrison, there had indeed been considerable discussion, which probably meant Robert had presented his case to the family council like a prosecutor arguing before a jury. The Harrison family reunion wasn't just any gathering. It was a 3-day event held every July at the family farm that had been in their possession for 4 generations. Cousins came from as far as California and Texas. His grandmother's famous potato salad recipe was prepared in industrial quantities. There were softball games, fishing contests, and evening bonfires where family stories were passed down like sacred texts. Marcus had attended 41 consecutive reunions, missing only the year he was born. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found his cousin Derek's number. Derek was Jake's age, but had always been more understanding of Marcus's career choices. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Marcus didn't leave a message. What would he say? "Hey, did you know I've been excommunicated from the family?" Instead, he opened his laptop and began typing. If he was going to be cut off from his family, he might as well understand exactly what he was being punished for. He pulled up his recent articles, reading them through the lens of someone looking for offense. The workplace safety piece was thoroughly researched and carefully written. He'd interviewed anonymous sources, verified claims through multiple channels, and presented facts without sensationalism. It was good journalism, the kind that actually served the public interest. But as he read, Marcus began to see what his father saw. Between the lines of professional reporting was an implicit criticism of the kind of business practices that men like Robert Harrison had built their livelihoods on. The old-school approach of cutting corners, maintaining loyalty over accountability, and keeping family business within the family. Marcus had spent his career learning to question authority, while his father had spent his life being the authority that shouldn't be questioned. His phone buzzed with a text from his girlfriend, Ashley. "How's your day going?" Marcus stared at the message, wondering how to explain that he'd just been formally disinvited from his own family. Ashley knew about the tension with his father, but this felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He typed back, "Just received some interesting family correspondence. I'll tell you about it when you get home." Then he sat back down at his kitchen table and read his father's letter one more time, this time looking for any hint of the man who had taught him to ride a bike and helped him with algebra homework. Ashley arrived home from her marketing job at 6:30, carrying Thai takeout and wearing the concerned expression she got when she sensed Marcus was processing something heavy. She developed an intuitive understanding of his moods over their 2 years of dating, particularly when it came to his complicated family dynamics. "Okay, what happened?" she asked, setting down the food and immediately focusing on his face. "You have that look like someone died or your editor killed a story you really cared about." Marcus handed her the letter without saying anything. He watched her read it, saw her eyebrows raise progressively higher with each sentence, and witnessed the exact moment she reached the family patriarch signature. "Holy shit, Marcus, this is..." She looked up at him, then back at the letter. "This is insane. He wrote this like you're being fired from the family." That's basically what happened. Marcus had spent the afternoon cycling through emotions: anger, hurt, confusion, and now settling into a strange sort of numbness. 41 years of family reunions, and now I'm persona non grata because I wrote an article about workplace safety. Ashley sat down across from him, the letter still in her hands. "Have you talked to anyone else in your family? Your mom? Your brother?" "He specifically told me not to contact other family members. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to know who sided with him in this considerable discussion," he mentioned. Marcus opened one of the Thai food containers, more for something to do with his hands than from any real hunger. "Part of me wonders if my mom even knows about this letter." "You can't seriously be considering just accepting this." Ashley's voice carried the indignation he felt but hadn't fully processed yet. "This is emotional manipulation, Marcus. He's trying to punish you for being successful at something he doesn't understand or approve of." Marcus had been thinking the same thing, but hearing it said aloud made it feel more real. His father had always been controlling, but this felt different. This felt calculated in a way that suggested Robert had been planning this move for months, just waiting for the right excuse. "What kills me is that I never even named his company in the article," Marcus said, finally taking a bite of pad thai. "I was careful about that. I knew it might cause problems, so I went out of my way to focus on industry-wide issues rather than specific businesses." "But he saw himself in it anyway," Ashley observed, "which probably means you hit close to home." That was the part Marcus had been avoiding thinking about. What if his article had been more personal than he'd intended? What if, subconsciously, he had been writing about his father's business practices? Growing up, he'd heard enough conversations between his parents, caught enough glimpses of how Robert handled problem employees or dealt with safety inspections. Maybe his journalism instincts had drawn from a deeper well of knowledge than he'd consciously acknowledged. His phone rang, displaying his brother Jake's name. Marcus and Ashley looked at each other. This was the first time any family member had tried to contact him since the letter arrived. "Should I answer it?" Marcus asked. "Definitely," Ashley said. "You need to know what's happening." Marcus accepted the call. "Hey, Jake." "Marcus, we need to talk." Jake's voice was strained, carrying the weight of someone who'd been designated as the family messenger. "Dad told me about the letter he sent." Jake's voice sounded tired, like someone who'd been caught in the middle of a fight he never wanted to be part of. Marcus put the phone on speaker so Ashley could hear, though he immediately regretted it when Jake's first words revealed just how deep the family division ran. "Look, I'm calling because Mom's been crying for 2 days straight, and Dad's been stomping around the house like a caged bear," Jake said. "This whole situation is tearing everyone apart." "Then maybe Dad shouldn't have sent that letter," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice level. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Come on, Marcus. You had to know that article would upset him. You basically described every corner-cutting practice he's ever used to keep the business afloat." Jake paused, and Marcus could hear machinery in the background. He was probably calling from the construction site. "I'm not saying I agree with how he handled it, but you weren't exactly subtle." The accusation stung because it carried a grain of truth Marcus hadn't wanted to acknowledge. "I'm a journalist, Jake. I write about issues that matter. If Dad sees himself in an article about unsafe workplace practices, maybe that says more about his business than about my reporting." "Jesus, do you hear yourself right now?" Jake's frustration was evident. "This is our family we're talking about, not some random company you're investigating. Dad built that business from nothing. He put all of us through school, bought Mom her dream house, and yeah, maybe he cut some corners along the way, but show me a small construction company that hasn't." Ashley reached across the table and squeezed Marcus's hand. She'd heard enough stories about Robert Harrison to understand the family dynamics at play, but this was her first real-time experience of how these conversations typically went. Marcus always ended up defending his career choices, while his family members defended practices they privately acknowledged were problematic. "So what exactly are you calling to tell me, Jake? That I should apologize for doing my job? That I should promise to only write articles that make the family look good?" Marcus was surprised by the edge in his own voice. I'm calling because Emma's kids have been asking why Uncle Marcus isn't coming to the reunion, and Mom doesn't know what to tell them." Jake's voice softened slightly. "And because I think this whole situation is stupid, but I also think you could have been more careful about how you handled that story." This was classic Harrison family dynamics, everyone acknowledging that the situation was problematic, while simultaneously defending the person who created the problem. Marcus had been on the receiving end of this pattern his entire life, but it felt different now that he was 32 and living his own life 3 states away. "Did you read the article, Jake?" Marcus asked. "Of course I read it." "And did you think it was unfair or inaccurate?" There was a long pause. Marcus could practically hear his brother wrestling with the question, probably looking around to make sure none of the other crew members were listening to his conversation. "No," Jake finally admitted. "It was fair, it was good reporting, but that doesn't mean it wasn't hurtful." "So what am I supposed to do with that? Stop being a journalist because the truth might hurt people's feelings?" Marcus realized he was raising his voice and made an effort to lower it. "I've spent my entire adult life trying to balance being a good family member with being good at my job. Apparently, Dad's decided those two things are incompatible." The conversation with Jake continued for another 20 minutes, circling through the same arguments and justifications that had defined Marcus's relationship with his family for years. By the time they hung up, nothing had been resolved, but Marcus had a clearer picture of the battle lines that had been drawn. His mother was devastated but afraid to contradict Robert. Emma was confused and hurt, caught between loyalty to her father and affection for her brother. The extended family members were being fed a narrative that painted Marcus as the ungrateful son who had betrayed family trust for professional gain. "That was exhausting," Ashley said after Marcus ended the call. "Is it always like that with your family?" "Pretty much." Marcus pushed the Thai food around his plate, his appetite completely gone. "Jake's actually the most reasonable one. He at least admits the article was fair, even if he thinks I should have handled it differently." "How exactly were you supposed to handle it differently? Not write about workplace safety because your dad might see himself in it." Ashley's indignation on his behalf was both comforting and frustrating. She understood the situation intellectually, but she'd grown up in a family where professional success was celebrated, not seen as a threat to family loyalty. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from his cousin Derek. "Hey, just heard about the reunion situation. This is bullshit. Call me." Finally, someone in the family who wasn't trying to find a middle ground or assign blame equally. Marcus called Derek immediately. "Dude, what the hell is Uncle Robert thinking?" Derek's voice was full of the outrage Marcus had been waiting to hear from someone in his family. "My mom told me about the letter, and I had to read it twice to believe it was real. Derek's mother was Robert's sister, which meant he'd grown up with a slightly different perspective on the Harrison family dynamics. He'd seen Robert's controlling tendencies from the outside, without the daily pressure of being one of Robert's direct children. "Your mom saw the letter?" Marcus asked. "Oh yeah, he sent copies to all the family heads, like he was issuing some kind of royal decree." Derek's disgust was evident. He called it maintaining family unity and said he hoped everyone would support his decision. This was worse than Marcus had imagined. Robert hadn't just excluded him from the reunion. He'd turned it into a public excommunication, forcing extended family members to choose sides. It was a calculated move designed to isolate Marcus completely and ensure that his exclusion became a permanent fixture of family gatherings. "How many people saw it?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "All the aunts and uncles plus the older cousins who help organize things, so probably 15 or 20 people." Derek paused. "For what it's worth, my parents think it's completely insane. Mom said she's never seen Robert act so vindictive." Ashley was watching Marcus's face as he processed this information. She could see him calculating the implications, understanding that this wasn't just about one missed reunion, but about his long-term relationship with his entire extended family. "Derek, can I ask you something honestly?" Marcus said. "Do you think I was wrong to write that article?" "Are you kidding me? I shared that article on Facebook the day it came out. Someone needs to be calling out companies that treat their workers like garbage." Derek's response was immediate and emphatic. "You did your job, and you did it well. If Uncle Robert can't handle that, it's his problem, not yours." It was the first unconditional support Marcus had received from anyone in his family, and it hit him harder than he'd expected. He felt tears starting to form and had to take a moment to compose himself. "Thanks, Derek. I needed to hear that. Listen, I've been thinking about this situation all day, and I have an idea." Derek's idea was both simple and potentially explosive. He wanted to organize a counter-reunion, a gathering of family members who disagreed with Robert's decision to exclude Marcus. It would be held the same weekend as the official reunion, but at Derek's family farm in Indiana, about 2 hours away from the traditional location in Ohio. "Think about it," Derek said, his excitement building as he outlined the plan. "We invite everyone who's uncomfortable with Uncle Robert's power trip. We have our own gathering with all the same traditions: softball games, fishing, campfire stories. We show him that he can't just unilaterally decide who's family and who isn't." Marcus was simultaneously intrigued and terrified by the suggestion. On one hand, it would be incredibly satisfying to demonstrate that Robert's authority wasn't as absolute as he believed. On the other hand, it would escalate the conflict to a level that might permanently fracture the family. Who would come? Marcus asked. Well, my parents are already on board. Cousin Jennifer from California said she's tired of Uncle Robert's controlling bullshit, her words, not mine. And I think we could get at least half the younger generation. A lot of people have been waiting for someone to stand up to him. Ashley was making go-for-it gestures from across the table, clearly excited by the idea of Marcus fighting back rather than just accepting his father's verdict. But Marcus knew his family in ways that Derek, despite his good intentions, might not fully appreciate. Robert Harrison didn't back down from confrontations. He escalated them. Derek, if we do this, it's going to get ugly. My father doesn't just get angry, he gets strategic. He'll make sure everyone who comes to your reunion pays a price for it. Maybe, Derek acknowledged. But maybe it's time someone called his bluff. He's been running this family like a dictatorship for years, and everyone just goes along with it because it's easier than fighting back. That evening, Marcus and Ashley spent hours discussing the proposal. Ashley was firmly in favor of the counter-reunion, seeing it as an opportunity for Marcus to reclaim his place in the family on his own terms. But Marcus was wrestling with deeper questions about what he actually wanted from his relationship with his family. What if we do this and it works? Marcus asked. What if we get 20 people to come to Derek's reunion and it's amazing? Then what? Do we just have two competing family reunions every year? Do we pretend the other half of the family doesn't exist? Or what if it forces your dad to realize he overreacted? Ashley countered. What if seeing how many people disagree with his decision makes him reconsider? You don't know my father. He doesn't reconsider decisions. He doubles down on them. Marcus was packing their small apartment now, working through the implications. If we do this, it's not just a counter-reunion. It's a declaration of war. But as the evening wore on, Marcus found himself leaning toward Derek's plan, not because he thought it would heal the family rift, but because he was tired of being the one who always backed down. For 32 years, he'd been the peacemaker, the one who swallowed his pride to maintain family harmony. Maybe it was time to let someone else worry about keeping the peace. His phone rang again. This time it was his cousin Jennifer from California, the one Derek had mentioned as being frustrated with Robert's controlling behavior. Marcus, I just got off the phone with Derek, she said without preamble. I want you to know that I think what your dad did is completely unacceptable, and if Derek's serious about organizing an alternative gathering, I'm in. Jennifer's call opened the floodgates. Over the next 2 days, Marcus received calls and texts from family members he hadn't spoken to in months, all expressing varying degrees of outrage about Robert's letter. His Aunt Patricia called to say she was disgusted by her brother's behavior. Cousin Michael from Texas sent a long text explaining how he'd been waiting for someone to challenge Robert's authority for years. Even his elderly grandmother, Robert's own mother, called to say she thought the letter was unnecessarily harsh. The support was both gratifying and overwhelming. Marcus began to realize that his father's controlling tendencies had affected far more family members than he'd previously understood. People shared stories about Robert's attempts to dictate their career choices, their marriages, even their political opinions. The Harrison family reunion, which Marcus had always seen as a celebration of family unity, apparently masked years of accumulated resentment. Derek was coordinating the counter-reunion with military efficiency. He'd created a group text that now included 12 family members, and they were planning everything from accommodations to activities. Jennifer had volunteered to handle food coordination, drawing on her experience managing corporate events in Los Angeles. Cousin Michael was driving up from Texas with his famous barbecue smoker. Even Marcus's grandmother had quietly indicated she might attend Derek's gathering instead of the official reunion. "This is actually happening," Ashley said, reading through the group text messages on Marcus's phone. "You're going to have your own family reunion." But Marcus was beginning to feel the weight of what they were setting in motion. The counter-reunion wasn't just a social gathering anymore. It was becoming a referendum on Robert Harrison's leadership of the family. People weren't just supporting Marcus. They were using his situation as an opportunity to express years of pent-up frustration with his father's authoritarian approach to family management. His mother finally called on Thursday evening. Linda Harrison had always been the diplomatic one, the family member who smoothed over conflicts and found compromise solutions. But when Marcus answered the phone, her voice was strained in a way he'd rarely heard. "Marcus, I need you to help me understand what's happening," she said. "Your father is furious about some kind of alternative reunion Derek is planning, and people are calling me asking which gathering they should attend. I don't know what to tell them." This was the conversation Marcus had been dreading. His mother had spent 43 years married to Robert Harrison, navigating his strong personality while maintaining relationships with extended family members. Now, she was being forced to choose between her husband and her son, with the entire family watching to see which side she'd take. "Mom, I never wanted any of this," Marcus said carefully. "Dad sent me a letter uninviting me from the family reunion. I didn't ask Derek to organize an alternative gathering." "But you're planning to attend it. It wasn't a question." "I don't know yet. Honestly, I'm not sure what the right thing to do is anymore." Marcus looked at Ashley, who was listening intently to his side of the conversation. All I know is that I wrote an article about workplace safety, and somehow that turned into being excluded from the family." Linda was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could hear the television in the background and imagined his parents in their living room, the same space where he'd spent countless evenings as a child, doing homework at the coffee table while his parents watched the news. "Your father feels betrayed," she finally said. "He thinks you used your position as a journalist to attack everything he's worked for." "And what do you think, Mom?" Another long pause. "I think you were doing your job. I also think your father is scared." The admission that Robert Harrison might be scared was so unexpected that Marcus had to ask his mother to repeat it. Linda had never been one to psychoanalyze her husband or share critical observations about his behavior, especially not with the children. But something about the current situation seemed to have loosened her usual diplomatic restraint. "He's been in construction for 35 years, Marcus. He's seen the industry change, watched bigger companies come in with better safety protocols and more resources. Your article made him realize that some of his old school methods might not be sustainable anymore." Linda's voice was thoughtful, like she was working through these realizations as she spoke. "That doesn't excuse the letter, but it might explain it." This perspective reframed the entire conflict in Marcus's mind. What if his father's reaction wasn't just about family loyalty or wounded pride? What if Robert Harrison, the man who had always seemed supremely confident in his business decisions, was actually feeling vulnerable about his ability to compete in a changing industry? "Mom, did Dad actually read the article, or did someone just tell him what it said?" "Oh, he read it multiple times. He had it pulled up on his computer for days, highlighting sections and muttering about how you'd gotten your information." Linda paused. "He also pulled some of his old safety files and spent a weekend updating protocols. Not that he'd ever admit that to you." The image of his father quietly implementing safety improvements while publicly raging about the article was both heartbreaking and infuriating. It suggested that Robert knew Marcus's reporting was accurate, even as he punished him for writing it. "So what happens now, Mom? Do we just pretend this never happened? Do I apologize for doing my job well?" Marcus was genuinely asking for guidance, hoping his mother might have some wisdom that could navigate this impossible situation. "I don't know, honey. I really don't." Linda sounded exhausted. "Your father is stubborn, and you're stubborn, and now Derek has gotten half the family involved in taking sides. I'm not sure there's a way back from this that doesn't involve someone swallowing a lot of pride." After the call ended, Marcus sat with Ashley on their small couch, both of them processing the complexity of family dynamics that extended far beyond the original workplace safety article. The counter-reunion had taken on a life of its own, becoming less about supporting Marcus and more about family members expressing their own frustrations with Robert's leadership style. Derek called that evening with an update that illustrated just how far the situation had escalated. "Dude, we're up to 18 confirmed attendees for our gathering. But here's the weird part. Some people are asking if they can attend both reunions." Both reunions. Yeah, like they want to come to ours on Saturday, but then drive over to the official one on Sunday. They're trying to find a way to support you without completely alienating Uncle Robert. Derek sounded amused by the diplomatic maneuvering. It's like they're treating this as a political campaign where they need to maintain relationships with both sides. The idea of family members shuttling between competing reunions would have been comical if it weren't so depressing. Marcus realized that his father's letter had created exactly the kind of family division that Robert had probably been trying to prevent. By attempting to exclude Marcus quietly, Robert had instead forced everyone to publicly choose sides. "Derek, what if we called this off?" Marcus asked suddenly. "What if we canceled the counter-reunion and I just accepted that I'm not welcome at family gatherings anymore?" "Are you serious right now?" Derek's voice carried genuine shock. "Marcus, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about whether Uncle Robert gets to unilaterally decide who's part of this family and who isn't." Friday morning brought a development that changed everything. Marcus was getting ready for work when his phone rang with a call from his sister Emma. She'd been notably absent from all the family drama, and Marcus had assumed she was firmly in their father's camp. Emma had always been the family member most concerned with maintaining peace and avoiding confrontation. "Marcus, we need to talk," Emma said, her voice tight with stress. "Can you meet me somewhere? I don't want to have this conversation over the phone." They agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between Chicago and Emma's suburban home, a neutral location that would give them privacy to discuss the family situation without interruption. Marcus called in sick to work and drove south, wondering what his sister might have to say that required face-to-face conversation. Emma was already seated in a corner booth when Marcus arrived, looking more frazzled than he'd seen her in years. She'd always been the put-together one, the family member who managed to balance career and motherhood while maintaining the image of effortless competence. But today, she looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Thank you for coming," she said as Marcus sat down across from her. "I've been trying to figure out how to handle this situation for days." "Handle what situation? I thought you agreed with Dad's decision." Marcus ordered coffee from the waitress, giving Emma time to collect her thoughts. "I never agreed with it. I just didn't disagree with it loudly enough." Emma's admission was quiet but clear. "Marcus, what Dad did was wrong. The letter was cruel, and the way he's trying to control everyone's reaction to it is even worse. This was not what Marcus had expected to hear from his traditionally diplomatic sister. Emma had built her adult identity around being the family peacemaker, the one who found compromise solutions and helped everyone get along. For her to directly criticize their father's behavior represented a significant shift. "Then why didn't you say anything earlier?" Marcus asked, trying to keep any accusation out of his voice. "Because I was scared," Emma said simply. "You live 3 states away, Marcus. You have a career and a life that exists independently of this family. I live 20 minutes from Mom and Dad. My kids go to school with Dad's friends' grandchildren. When Dad gets angry at someone, it affects everything: family gatherings, business relationships, social connections. I can't afford to be on his bad side." The honesty of Emma's explanation was both illuminating and depressing. Marcus began to understand that his physical distance from the family had given him a freedom that his siblings didn't have. Jake worked for their father's company, making open disagreement potentially career-threatening. Emma lived in the same community, making family conflict socially complicated. Only Marcus had achieved enough independence to risk Robert's displeasure. "But something changed," Emma continued. "Yesterday, my 8-year-old daughter asked me why Grandpa was mad at Uncle Marcus, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. I couldn't explain to my child why her uncle wasn't welcome at family gatherings anymore without admitting that her grandfather was being unreasonable." Emma reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "So I wrote Dad a letter." Marcus read Emma's letter with growing amazement. It was respectful but firm, expressing disappointment with Robert's decision and requesting that he reconsider Marcus's exclusion from the reunion. She'd pointed out that the family's strength had always come from supporting each other's successes, not punishing them. She'd reminded their father that Marcus's journalism career was something to be proud of, not ashamed of. "This is really well written, Emma. What did Dad say when you gave it to him?" "I haven't given it to him yet. I wanted to talk to you first." Emma looked nervous but determined. "Marcus, I want to come to Derek's reunion." Emma's decision to attend the counter reunion was the tipping point that transformed the gathering from a rebellious gesture into a legitimate family event. By Friday evening, Derek was reporting that they now had 23 confirmed attendees, including several family members who had initially planned to attend the official reunion. The group text had evolved into a complex planning operation, with people coordinating carpools, menu items, and accommodations. Marcus spent Friday night in a state of nervous anticipation mixed with growing dread. What had started as his father's attempt to quietly exclude him from a family gathering had snowballed into a public referendum on Robert Harrison's leadership of the family. The counter-reunion was no longer about supporting Marcus. It had become a vehicle for family members to express years of accumulated frustration with Robert's controlling behavior. Ashley was excited about the weekend, seeing it as validation that Marcus's family members weren't all willing to accept Robert's authoritarian decisions. But Marcus was beginning to worry about the long-term consequences of what they were setting in motion. Even if the counter-reunion was successful, it would likely create a permanent division within the family. Saturday morning brought a surprise that illustrated just how far the situation had escalated. Marcus's phone rang at 7 a.m. with a call from his grandmother, the 84-year-old matriarch who had attended every family reunion for 6 decades. "Marcus, dear, I need someone to drive me to Derek's gathering today," she said without preamble. "I've decided I don't approve of your father's behavior, and I want to show my support for you." Marcus was stunned. His grandmother, Robert's own mother, was choosing to attend the counter-reunion instead of the official gathering. It was a move that would undoubtedly infuriate Robert and send a clear message about where the family's true elder stood on the conflict. "Grandma, are you sure about this? Dad's going to be really upset." "Marcus, I've been dealing with your father's stubborn streak for 57 years. I think I can handle his disapproval for one weekend." Her voice carried the dry humor that had made her Marcus's favorite family member throughout his childhood. "Besides, someone needs to make sure Derek's gathering has proper supervision." Marcus drove to his grandmother's house, located just 2 hours from Derek's farm. She was waiting on her front porch with a small suitcase and a covered dish that smelled like her famous chocolate chip cookies. As they drove toward Indiana, she shared stories about previous family conflicts and how they'd been resolved. "Your grandfather and your father had a similar falling out when Robert was about your age," she said. "Robert wanted to expand the business faster than your grandfather thought was wise. They didn't speak for almost 6 months." "How did they resolve it?" "Time and stubbornness, mostly. They were both too proud to apologize, so they just pretended the argument never happened and moved on." She looked out the window at the passing farmland. "But this feels different. Your father isn't just disagreeing with your business decisions. He's trying to punish you for being successful at something he doesn't understand." When they arrived at Derek's farm, Marcus was amazed by what he found. The counter-reunion looked exactly like the official family gatherings he remembered from childhood, complete with volleyball nets, picnic tables, and a designated area for the traditional softball game. Family members were arriving in clusters, carrying covered dishes and coolers as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Derek greeted them with enormous grins and bear hugs. "Marcus, this is incredible. We've got people here I haven't seen in years." As Marcus looked around at the assembled family members, he realized that something significant was happening beyond just his conflict with his father. The counter-reunion exceeded everyone's expectations in ways that were both wonderful and troubling. By mid-afternoon, 28 family members had gathered at Derek's farm, representing nearly 60% of the people who typically attended the official reunion. The group included 3 of Robert's 4 siblings, most of the younger generation, and even some family members who had driven in from out of state specifically to show their support. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of being the guest of honor at a family gathering organized in protest of his exclusion from the actual family gathering. People kept approaching him to express their support, share stories about their own conflicts with Robert, or simply to catch up on his life in Chicago. It was simultaneously the most supported he'd ever felt within his family, and the most aware he'd ever been of the family dysfunction that his father's authoritarian style had created.